Welcome to this edition of the Adventures in Learning podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Diane, and today we are talking to Alyssa Dituro. She is the Executive Director of the McNeilly Center for Children in Nashville. Alyssa is an early childhood expert. She's got more than 10 years experience directing high-quality early childhood programs. I was fortunate enough to see her giving an anti-racist preschool workshop at SECA in Chattanooga recently. And I got to tell you, you are in for a treat. So sit back and enjoy the ride. Alyssa, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I loved meeting you at SECA. It was so much fun.
Well, and I'm so glad you're here today because, as you know, early childhood is so dear to my heart after spending 10
Yes.
years running a preschool. And I love what you guys are doing at the McNeilly Center. Before we get into that, I want to hear a little bit more about you. So I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody. Tell us about your adventures in learning. How did you get to
Yes.
where you are today?
Yes. I am very fortunate that I have a family that is very learning heavy. Right. My grandma, my grandpa, my mom always had a book in their hand, two books at a time, mostly. They were very adamant about me reading the newspaper and really just being a citizen of the world and knowing my environment. And so that was really my adventures in learning start. But I've also just always been passionate about what you can get out of learning. You can just change your whole mindset. I'm amazed sometimes at what I've learned and where I'm at because I've taken the opportunity to just deep dive on things. And I think that learning for me, when I joined into this, right, understanding that learning is powerful for others, is when I was working in my church preschool, nursery and high school, and just getting to see the spark of the children, that early learning, right? Oh my gosh, I grasped this rattle for the first time, or we're saying words and we're walking, and the igniting that happens in the brain is so, so exciting. So I myself, I love saying I'm a lifelong learner. I learned how to paint last couple of years during the pandemic. I took up acrylic painting as a hobby. I'm a hula hoop as a hobby as well. And I'm always, always, always reading. So I think that learning is critical. It is the most powerful tool we have to change the world that we live in.
That's awesome. And just before we get into the meat of this, can you remember what some of the books were that influenced you as a child?
Oh, yes. So I am a big Shel Silverstein fan. Anything that is a goofy rhyming poem, I absolutely love. And I love a lot of Oliver Jeffers' writings. So the crayon, the day the crayons quit. Those are books that even though I didn't read them when I was younger, I absolutely love. And then I don't remember. I know it's like the Three Little Pigs remake, or like a retelling of it, where the wolf comes in and he's like a cool guy. But I've always liked really, fairy tales and Greek mythology, things that are more surreal.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about early childhood. Tell us about the McNeilly Center and what you all do.
Yes. So the McNeilly Center has been there since 1916, and it's 4 acres that we sit on here in Nashville, which is just amazing when you really think about it. 1916 was a long time ago, and the world has had a lot happen, right? But the one thing that's consistent is that people need childcare to work. And so what we do is really help our families not only with childcare, but with community resources. So we have 150 children currently that we're caring for every day. And that looks like parents coming in, our infant program and our toddler program. We have chickens on site that we get to play with. And of course, during the egg shortage, people kept joking we should sell them as a fundraiser. And we have pear trees and fig trees. And then we also are very literacy focused. So we have 2 reading instructional coaches that work with our program directors and teachers to make sure our children are meeting the kindergarten readiness and they're ready, more than ready to read before they leave us. So that really our bread and butter is childcare, but of course we've got lots of other things that we do and work with to partner with the community to support the families.
It sounds like a magical place to be.
It is. Gosh, I was just telling someone earlier about our monarch garden and they were like, stop. I was like, I know, I promise. It is what early childhood should be, right?
And to be
Just
able to learn through play, to add the literacy, to include the STEM, and to have the nature. You guys have it
yes.
all.
It is amazing. We have a new outdoor classroom we just broke ground on a few months ago. So of course that is our big, we're excited about it. The kids are all out there. But seeing them in the mud kitchen and bringing the classroom outside and really getting that science and just doing it right there in the moment, using the math in the critical moments like that too. And so I don't think that people realize, that they are little scientists in the crib. They're little engineers and mathematicians. They want to tinker. That's what their brains want to do. It's the adults, like we are the people that hold them back sometimes.
Well, and I think that as teachers, we sometimes get afraid of the science and the
Yep.
tinkering and all of that.
And the
Not
mess.
real. Yes, and the mess. And if we
Because
play,
it's messy. Science is so messy. And we don't, right? I know I had this conversation with somebody. They were like, oh, we're not a Play-Doh household. And I was like, what? How can you not have Play-Doh when you have little kids? Because it is such a, right? That's texture and tactile.
absolutely.
And let's be real, they're gonna taste it. We can build with that. We can mold with that. Right. In our block centers, we try to have posters so when parents they see, right? Yes, they're building with blocks, but really they read a book about the Taj Mahal earlier today. And so what they're doing is building the Taj Mahal and figuring out, okay, what works together and how high can we build things and how wide can we build them and how many tall and how I am like, you guys, these are architects, y'all. These are they're doing really cool stuff. You've just got to see it at their level.
Exactly. And it's an opportunity to introduce them to diverse architects and engineers from across the world. My favorite book right now is Building Up.
Ooh, yeah.
And I love that book because it shows the kids in their element, but then
Absolutely.
it shows the real world inspiration. And then you've got
Yes.
the back matter that gives you a little bit to teach about real people.
Yes.
And so suddenly you've broadened the world with
Absolutely.
one picture book and one play opportunity.
Or baking, right? I tell people all the time, I'm like, y'all, baking is science. That's why not everybody can bake, right?
Absolutely.
That's why sometimes people's cakes come out flat. And so, my 6-year-old, he loves to bake, loves cooking shows, the great baking, but the measuring, that's math. We have to measure, what does a 4th cup of flour look like? What does this look like? We're going to set the timer. We're going to, that is math, what they're doing. Yummy math, yummy science. But that is, right? Even if you're making spaghetti at home, or it's really, I don't think people realize how much STEAM is easily integrated into everything we do in the early childhood sector.
Oh, 100%. And as you said,
Hopscotch.
they are yes. You have to draw the squares, you have to count the numbers, you have to be able to count forward and back and figure out where you're skipping.
Patterning, right? 1, 2, 1, 2. What if my squares are off? And it is so amazing to watch them, right? I tell parents, sometimes just don't get involved and really watch them play and look at what these little scientists are doing. Look at what they can do. Even the matter, so we have, infants and water play. So that is the best science and sensory play for them to really, that cause and effect.
Oh,
I tell
absolutely.
People, cause and effect is the easiest science you can teach in early childhood. If I turn the faucet on, the water turns on. If I turn the faucet off, what happens? If we close the door, there's less sun, or the blinds, and we talk about the weather and the growing cycle, because we do have the garden, and so the children can see live what a growing cycle looks like.
Oh, that is so cool. And they're able to make that immediate connection. And if you're if you're growing vegetables, then they're able,
and they get to take them home, and we will use them for cooking classes with the parents. We've done some Zoom cooking classes. So they'll get the materials and take it home, and we'll all cook, in our houses on Zoom.
Of course.
But again, a nice, easy way to interact, not only with family engagement, but we're doing science, we're doing math together.
And I bet you already know about this book, but as you're talking, I'm thinking about Farmer Will and his growing table.
Yes, I love that one. And that it's just so, even at Thanksgiving, sorry, I'm trying to well, I've got my grab bag of books, but right, this was one we loved at Thanksgiving.
We Are
We Are
Grateful. I love that
Grateful.
book.
It's such a good one. It's so beautiful. But talking right with the children while we were doing all of our fall activities and raking the leaves on the playground and what is right, because we are again, we have 4 acres, and so it's important for us to be good stewards of the acreage we sit on, and the children to have the respect for that, the land and this right, and the grass,
Yes.
and the air and everything. And so it just right, we made some weave baskets like they do in the book. What is that,
and if
right?
our listeners don't know, and if our
engineering.
listeners don't know that book, one of the things I love about We Are Grateful is you're not looking at Indigenous people as historical figures. You're
Right,
looking
they're
at them in
here
everyday
now.
life, here and now.
Yes, yes, and that is the most critical thing. I know, STEAM, of course, but right, books are the best way. But I have the book. It's a children's book about the inventor of the super soaker, and it's a Black man.
Yes, I love
Yes,
him.
and my son was so like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. When we learned about George Washington Carver, we made peanut soup, right? Because that's a real thing that you can make. It is a Black recipe, a Southern recipe. And then, right, we learned about George Washington Carver. Then we made peanut soup, and we talked about peanuts. And it's easy to bring the multiculturalism in a multitude of ways, right? This is one of my favorites too, Sing Don't Cry. This is about a grandpa who visits from Mexico, and they don't share the same language, and they're going to miss him, but they all know this song. And so, right, talking about families and how some families have to communicate differently through song and other ways because they don't speak the same language.
And that goes so well with Drawn Together, which looks at that same thing, but it's looking at it through drawing and through the art and that language barrier.
Another great way to introduce, diversity is art. There's great books, even artists like Basquiat are bringing the art in and letting the kids experience what that looks like. Or even if we're wanting to introduce female artists, it's Women's History Month, Georgia O'Keeffe, or even poetry, right? There's really great ways to bring, okay, it's National Poetry Month. We're going to listen to a poem by whoever.
Amanda Gorman.
Yeah, Amanda Gorman. I know. I'm like trying to think of a children's poet. I was like, some poets
Change Sings.
Yes. And what does that look like? And how does that make you feel? And right, it doesn't, or even Encanto, right? Music.
Yes.
What shows are we talking about with our children or music? Gracie's Corner, a great example of a diverse way to introduce things into the classroom.
So you have leaped right into where I wanted to go, which is how do we, first of all, why is it so important for our children that we create these anti-racist, multicultural classroom communities? So we'll start with that, and then we're going to go into how to do it.
Yes. So it's critical for all of the research reasons that we know. We know that children of color, especially, right, we know that preschool, not just school to pipeline, but the preschool to prison pipeline starts early, and that when children are marginalized and othered, that continues. But more importantly, that research shows us that Black children are, even by the Black adults that care for them, are seen as a behavioral problem and a behavioral issue, and that children who are second language learners are also marginalized in the classroom. Children that, come in a dress and people don't understand. And so really, it's important for us, if we want to be the change in the world as the adults, first, we have to look at ourselves and say, this is something we value. And then tell our children that we value that. Because we want every child to be seen, heard, and valued. We want every family to be seen, heard, and valued. The easiest way for us to change the world that we currently live in is through our youth, right? Through empowering them to be the real people and humans in their full selves. Because we know when people feel fully seen, they grow and they can express themselves. I get so excited about the work, the social emotional competency I see, not only in my staff as we've taken on anti-racism and anti-bias work, but right in our families and in our children, and the tough conversations that they can have that we should have as adults that we just don't have the capacity to. And so it's important that our children have the tools and resources. So when they see something wrong, they know that they have a support system behind them to do the right thing.
I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. It is absolutely critical that we pass on the appropriate tools
Yeah.
and recognize the humanity in every one of our children, because they do each have that magical spark. And the only way we're going to be saved as a world is if these little guys know how to empathize with each other, how to collaborate, how to give each other space to be uniquely themselves.
Right. And not be afraid of differences and really celebrate them, right? We all have differences and we all have good and bad about us as humans, right? Just individual humans. But at the end of it, we all deserve love, kindness, and respect. And our children deserve that as well. Many of them, and especially they're not getting that at home, right? The world is really hard right now for families, and they have to have a support system that says, we are here for you as a whole family, not your child at pick up and drop off only. We are doing the work to say that we want to be better in this world as well.
And I think that's really critical, that family, and whatever component family looks like for the child, needs to be welcomed into and a part of the preschool. I know that was crucial to us at Millbrook Community Preschool. We wanted to be that whole family location. And I know for you guys at McNeilly, that's a central point of what you do.
Absolutely. You can't just care for the child, right? We can't just care about the child. We have to care about the family. And truthfully, part of the work that we're doing in early childhood around anti-racism is having the tools for our families to calm these conversations, because it's a lot for them to navigate as well. Or they want to put it off because they're young, right? But we know that children don't, they can see race as young as infancy, and they have a preference for the race of the caregivers that they care with, and the things that families say and societal messages are the reality, right? The dominant culture lives around our children, and so we've got to make sure if our families need these resources as well, that they know that they can come to us because they're having these tough conversations, right? And we want to make sure they're equipped.
Exactly. So what does that look like on a day-to-day basis at the McNeilly Center? How do you set up an anti-racist preschool or an anti-racist child care center?
Yes. So, I mean, one of the biggest things that you need to do first and foremost is have that statement, right? Your parents need to know, what does it look like here for diversity, equity, and inclusion? And what does that mean here? And right, so we make sure our families understand that it means we are breaking down the barriers. We are doing the work to make sure that you see that we're are putting our money where our mouth is. So doing trainings. So right, our whole staff has done anti-bias education training. My management team will be working with the state to do a deep dive, 8-week course on anti-racism and what that looks like. We've done some book studies as a staff to talk about those things. And I mean, and they're not always comfortable conversations, but we have to know that if we're not actively working towards being anti-racist, we're just sitting in the middle. And that, right, everybody has racist tendencies. I work in a 99% center of color. However, these are still conversations we have to have, because there's racism within every group, and we have our own opinions, and that we have to dismantle about the families that we work with. And so one of the best examples is, are we mispronouncing names? Are we saying everybody's name right? If we're not sure, can we ask for the pronunciation? Are we promoting the people of color that work within our centers? If they are, if it's white owned or if it's a corporation, what does that look like? the leadership team. I know this isn't necessarily just anti-racism, but it is, if you do have men working on site, and especially men of color, are they the default disciplinarian, right? The PE coach, or the black science teacher who's typically the tough guy, or he was, the football coach. Are we relying on those people to be the disciplinarian out of a stereotype? And then is there any DEI equity focused strategy? Is that a conversation that's even been had with your families, with a survey, with, if you have a board? Is that something, right? What focus areas even exist, and have they even been identified before we can start to build these centers that are really anti-racist?
And so day to day in your center, what does a typical day look like for the kids?
Oh man, yeah. So they come in, we have drop off until 9, and of course they have breakfast, and then we will do circle time. And so we use conscious discipline and Frog Street. And so everybody does baby doll circle time, which is one of my favorite things, because it's very social, emotional minded. Every child has a baby doll that they're caring for and nurturing for. And again, right, the stereotypes of men, and certain men are supposed to be tough. We have to really break that down with our families sometimes and explain why we do baby doll circle time and what it creates, and the empathy. It's reminding our staff of language, reminding the parents that, we are inclusive in every single way. We don't tolerate certain languages. We don't use slurs. Books. What does the classroom actually look like? What does it look like? Do you have diverse pictures on the walls, right? When we have all those, the science teacher and are the people on the wall BIPOC people? Are they women? Do they represent the world at large, not just the community you live in? Do you have the resources if you need an interpreter for families? Is there a community group you're working with? Are we printing things in more than just English, right? Are we printing things in English and Spanish? And if, in the case of Nashville, English, Spanish, and Kurdish are our biggest languages. So is that clear? If families have a preference, right? I know for us, we have some cultural preferences, and are those respected within the center as it pertains to if children need to pray, or a staff member needs to pray at a certain time of day, or they have to eat a certain meal, or they bring food in? Is that being, oh, that's so weird and gross? Or why are we really dismantling and
Are we
talking
respecting
about
it?
Right. Having those conversations, and remembering that everybody is different, right? And that there's no right or wrong way. Everybody just has a different culture, and we can learn from those things. Is the staff treating children differently? And that really is, like, as an administrator, right, really having to be making sure children aren't being talked to or othered because of their race, or in the past, I've had a teacher say, well, her dad probably isn't even in the picture, right? Discussing a child of color. And so so we're going to have that conversation about why you said that, why you assume that, and where we can go forward, because, right, this isn't what we do here. And then I think another thing, right, like, no, assuming certain families don't care because of their race, or certain families will care more because they're white, or that is really, right, it's looking at ourselves.
Yeah. And doing the
What does
work
this
and
center
checking
look
our
like?
own biases.
Yeah. I'll send the link, but it's a wonderful checklist. But again, what do the books look like in our center? What do the pictures on the wall look like? Do we have signage that says, we are welcoming here. We do not discriminate on the basis of race, color, and creed. And of course, we think in 2023, why would I need to write that? But we do, because there's the reality of the world is that there's places that don't feel that way. And we have to be that safe place for the families to know that their children will be safe there and valued as a whole human.
Absolutely. And if a center, we'll put some of those links into the show notes, because I do want people to be able to see
Absolutely.
the graphics about when children discover race. It's a beautiful, it's a great
Yes.
thought-provoking
I will make sure
graphic
I drop that in
to
there.
include the links to the checklists and other things. Because I think if you're in early childhood, but if you're in any school or social environment, this is work we all need to be doing.
Yeah, and raising race conscious children.org is absolutely just the most wonderful resource. Again, families want to do the work, right? A lot of people are assuming families don't want to do the work on this. It's too much or they're overwhelmed. And that is not true. Our families very much want to do this work. It is important to them, no matter their race. They are like, we want to do this work. We want better for our children. And that is our responsibility, is to give families resources. Right. I tell our teachers all the time, this is your 500th, 600th potty trained child. This is their first, second, or third. We have to hold this space. They look to us as the experts. And so we have to say, hey, yeah, you are struggling with how to talk to your child about race, or, children say things and parents are like, oh my gosh.
Right. My child said that. How could they possibly have said that?
And I handled it wrong, or how do I handle this in the future? Or how do we talk about them wondering about skin color? And so, right, it's nice to just say, well, here's a link, here's a resource. Do you want us to sit in on this conversation with you? Because it's all tricky. Raising children is extremely difficult, and everybody wants to do it well.
And there is no instruction manual.
No, oh my gosh, no, there's no instruction manual. I know this is right. Like, this is the one of our favorites that we keep on the shelf for families.
I love AntiRacist, baby.
It's the cutest. Yes.
Ibram X. Kendi has done so much to promote empathy and kindness in the field.
So much. And I love the way he explains it. And Anti-Racist Baby doesn't see certain groups as better or worse. Anti-Racist Baby loves a world that's truly diverse.
I think that's a beautiful one.
Yeah, it is such a good book, and children need to hear that is a thing that they can be, right?
And that we value it.
And that we value that, and that, right, even right, my 6-year-old, I'm like, even you are an advocate. You're an anti-racist when you say to people, right, hey, you don't say things like that, or I don't like that, or we don't talk about people like, that's wonderful. Or his curly hair, right? He's so proud of it. And I'm like, yes, that is what we do in the world to dismantle it. Children are pretty accepting. It's the adults, right?
Exactly.
That need the mind switch. Children are pretty, oh yes, we understand all people are equal and valuable. It's how do we keep pouring that message into them versus a different message. And like Skin Like Mine is one of my favorites.
Oh, that's a beautiful book. And that's actually, you're transitioning right into what I wanted to do, which was to ask you about some of your favorite books that you like to share at the center. So share away.
Yeah, so those are two of my favorites. Oh, this one I absolutely love. It's Watch Me. It's a story of immigration and inspiration. Again, right? Being anti-racist doesn't mean we put just MLK books on the shelf.
Absolutely.
Right? Making sure that diversity is there. But this one, yes, is written by an author who immigrated from Sierra Leone. And so his journey of immigrating as a child and becoming a doctor. And so Watch Me, right? He kept getting told by people that, oh, you don't speak English as a first language, and how are you ever going to become a doctor? And so it is a very great book.
Oh, wow.
Princess Hair.
That looks amazing.
Princess. Yeah. Princess Hair is one of our favorites to read. And it just talks about this party that they're having. Oh, like this princess has Bantu knots. And so it is a book about natural hair, princesses with dreadlocks, and showing just different, not every princess has the same hair, but every princess loves her princess hair. So talking about
what a great message.
Yeah, it is a really, really wonderful book about, right, the different ways that princesses, even, right, buns, they love to run with their buns, and curls and pearls and teeny weeny afros. So just showing all the diverse hair that girls can have. Princess Hair is one of my favorites. And then This is another one. I'm Every Good Thing.
Love that book.
Yeah, it's just such a beautiful book. I love Ode to a Fresh Cut too by him. That's
Yes.
just a
And what a great way to lift up our young boys.
Yes. I'm big on affirmations for our young men. This is another one I love, Snow in Jerusalem. So
That
these
looks
two live
beautiful.
in the Muslim quarter, and each boy is kind of just new to the area. So it's just a peace and friendship story about these two boys who end up, in Jerusalem during the snowfall and really becoming good friends.
Oh, I
I
like that.
love this book. It is so beautiful. Again, right, men and boys having a quality friendship and having a soft moment together. This is another good one, The Skin You Live In.
Yes.
I love this one. Just talking, I mean, we've done a lot of work with our kiddos about skin, right? And again, it's really easy to add anti-racist things to your center. Crayons, paper, right? Do we have multicultural crowns? Do we have multicultural markers? Do we have multicultural paper?
Exactly. And that's an easy thing to stock in your different centers, looking at different play experiences and making sure they reflect different environments, stacked with different books, different art materials, different images on the wall.
Bringing the community in, right? It's wonderful to just reach out and say, hi, whatever cultural center might be nearby. And we've done that plenty of times. We had the National Museum of African American Music come in and teach us how to play spoons. And so the children were able to learn, the history of why spoons are important in the community and learn how to play them. We've had people, of a Vietnam couple that has a restaurant do a presentation on, that. And or somebody came and made enchiladas. How are we letting people bring their culture into the center instead of taking it and using it and then putting it back, right?
Absolutely. I used to love bringing the community into our preschool and engaging the kids and taking them for walks because we were in a village. We were able to go for walks in the community and go into other people's spaces as well. And so they had a real appreciation.
The children love it. It's important for them, right, to see people in non-stereotypical ways.
Exactly. And adults in all different roles.
Yes. And men doing things that are stereotypically female and right, like the female firefighters that come, or we want them to see that this world is beautiful and diverse in so many ways, right? We always talk about that at school. Like, what is it that we bring that's special, and with our staff too, right? We've got to do the work at the teacher level and admin level for it to work with the kids. But how are we looking at our biases and breaking them down and having the tough conversations? Because if we can't do it with ourselves, how can we do it with kids?
No, that makes total sense. And also, I think giving ourselves grace to be able to stumble, to make mistakes, to ask the wrong things, journey, and then to fix it.
Yes, it is absolutely a journey. And our families have to know, right? We're not always going to get it right, but we are asking for your help along the way as well to get things right. When September is coming, do you have anybody in the group in your community or in your center that would love to come for, Hispanic History Month and do something fun, or
Rosh Hashanah, or
yes, Eid. Let's have these foods brought in. Let's try them and talk about it. And right, because that's us, right? Othering foods is a very racist thing to do. So let's try other people's foods, and why do other people eat certain things, and what does it look like? What does it taste like? That, but because kids are curious and it's easier. I always tell people, I'm like, it's easier to have this conversation with a curious 4 or 5-year-old with love in their eyes, right, than an adult who's already just asking out of a angry way. A child truly, right? If they're like, can I touch your hair? They truly want to know.
Right. It's very different than an adult asking that question.
Yes. Or, a child saying, that's a Black person. It's like, well, yes, let's talk about that versus and so not shaming them for having these questions, right? Children are curious by nature. They're going to notice differences. We all notice differences. It's okay. Our differences should not be hidden. They are what makes us wonderful. We have to encourage children to have the right questions about differences and ask the questions and not just say, oh, well, okay, Diane Jackson is a white woman. And so, okay, I'm going to make all these assumptions about her and leave her over here. No, they're supposed to be curious about where we can connect and get to the same place, and where do we share the same loves and passions, and right, and where can we see each other's full humanity.
Exactly. And then how do we join together on this journey and support each other?
Yes. Yes. And again, ultimately our children have to see us doing it,
I
right?
agree.
They have to see us doing this work and saying we value people that are different than us, and we include them, right? We don't just have them here. We welcome the community and anybody that wants to come talk about their life experiences so we can learn more.
Well, Alyssa, this has been such a powerful and joyful conversation.
Thank
I would love to
you.
continue this conversation because I
I
think we've
know, it's
got
so
so much
fun.
more to say. And so I'm kind of thinking that maybe this becomes a quarterly feature on the Adventures in
Okay.
Learning
Yeah,
podcast, that
let's do
let's
it.
do this once a season and check
Okay.
in and
Sounds good.
continue this conversation, because it has been such a joy. And we will
Thank
drop all
you.
of those resources into the show notes for you. And I highly encourage you all to check out the McNeilly Center and the good work that Alyssa
Thank
Dituro is
you.
doing.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much.